Hello and welcome to Fun Bikes TV. My name is James and today we're going to build a 50R mini pit bike. To start with, cut the banding on the box and then the tape to allow you access to the vehicle. Split your box in half and remove it from the outside of the cage. You will then need a 13 socket to undo all the bolts holding the cage together. Once you've removed the cage, you will find that the bike is held in with a wire around the back wheel, which you will need to remove. You'll then need to remove the front axle from the bike using a 17 and 19 spanner to undo the nut and then sliding the axle out while lifting the front of the bike ever so slightly to allow you to remove the axle. With the bike you will receive your front axle with 2 spaces and a nut on it, your front wheel, your foot pegs, your handlebar pad and cover, your front number board, your keys, your manual, 2 handlebar clamps and 4 bolts. Your front mudguard is attached to the rear wheel. We are now going to fit the handlebars to the bike. You will need your 2 handlebar clamps and the 4 bolts. Apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of each of the bolt threads. Place a handlebar clamp over one of the bars and loosely attach one of the bolts. Repeat the process on the rear bolt and then repeat the process on the opposite side. Using a 6 Allen key, start to tighten the bars. As you do so, align the bars with the fork so that at the same angle and start to tighten them up. Make sure the gap at the front and the rear of the clamp is equal on both sides. Once you're happy they align correctly, fully tighten the bars. Using a 13 socket, tighten the 2 bars at the bottom of the handlebar clamps on the yokes to make sure they are tight. We're then going to attach the front mudguard. Remove the 3 bolts from the bottom yoke using an 8 spanner or socket. Place one of your bolts through the mudguard and apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the thread. Align the bolt with the relevant hole in the lower yoke and thread the bolt into the hole. Once the mudguard is secured, apply stud lock to the end of the other 2 bolts and reattach them through the holes in the mudguard and then fully tighten your front mudguard up. We're now going to fit our front wheel. You need the axle, the 2 spacers, nut and your front wheel. Take your front axle and slide it into the forks on the non-brake side and then slide the shorter spacer onto the bolt. Take your front wheel and slide the disc into the brake caliper and then align the axle and slide it into the wheel. Put your longer spacer between the wheel and the fork and then slide the axle through and using a 17 and 19 spanner fully tighten the front wheel, applying a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. We're now going to tighten the front brake caliper using a 10 spanner or socket. Then using the 5 Allen key, tighten all 4 disc bolts. We're now going to route the front brake hose. Using a Phillips screwdriver, undo the clamp on the fork and then align your hose through the clips. Replace the clamp and tighten it up. Using a Phillips screwdriver, tighten all the foot guard bolts. Make sure the steering stop bolts are tight using a 6 Allen key. Remove the bolts and clamps from the key barrel. Sliding the brackets onto the top section of the number board. Align your front number board with the pins coming up from the mudguard and push them onto it. And then using the 8mm bolts, reattach them to the front number board into the nuts to hold it securely in position. Using a 5 Allen key, make sure your number board and key bracket is tight. Using a Phillips screwdriver, undo the clamp on the number board, slide your hose through and then reattach the clamp. Work your way around the bike, tightening all the plastic bolts using a 5 Allen key. Tighten the exhaust manifold bolts using an 8 spanner or socket, and check the heat shield bolts using a 5 Allen key. Using an 8 socket, tighten the bolt on top of the fuel tank. Using a 5 Allen key and 10 spanner, make sure the tank scoop mounting brackets are tight. Remove the split pin from the foot peg mounting bracket. When you remove it, a washer will come off the pin at the same time. Select the correct foot peg, align it inside the mounting bracket and then push your pin through slightly. Once the pin is through slightly, push the spring into position and then fully insert the pin through the spring and the bottom mounting point. Once you have done this, replace the washer and then replace the split pin, making sure you bend it over so it is secure and cannot fall out. Remove the split pin from the opposite foot peg mounting and attach the foot peg, repeating the same process as the opposite side. Using a 10 and 12 spanner, tighten the top engine mount bolt and apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. Using a 17 spanner or socket, make sure the kickstand is tight. We're now going to tighten the carburetor and carburetor manifold using an 8 spanner or socket. Using a punch, tap down the locking bracket on the rear sprocket bolts. Using a 17 and 19 socket, tighten the rear axle, applying a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. Using a 13 and 14 spanner or socket combination, tighten the lower rear shock bolt. Applying a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. Using a 10 and 12 spanner, make sure the lower engine mount bolt is tight and apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. Remove the bungs from the rear swing arm and using a 12 and 14 socket, make sure the rear swing arm is tight and then apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. Once you're happy it is tight and you've applied the stud lock, replace the bungs back into the frame. Tighten the rear disc brake bolts using a 6 Allen key. Using a 12 socket or spanner, tighten the valves on the front and rear wheels. We now need to remove the seat from the vehicle. Use a 12 socket or spanner. Tighten the upper rear shock bolt using a 13 and 14 spanner and apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. Then using an 8 socket or spanner, tighten the rear tank and the battery casing bolts, and then use a 5 Allen key to tighten the rear plastic bolts. We're now ready to attach our battery to the vehicle. Remove the battery strap and then lift the battery out. Remove the plastic film from the battery to allow you access to the nuts and bolts. The battery has positive and negative symbols next to the terminals, and the terminals are also colour coordinated, red for positive, black for negative. Situated underneath the seat you will find the positive and negative wires. Make sure you attach the correct wire to the correct terminal. Red to the red terminal, black to the black terminal. Remove your nuts from the bag and slide them underneath one of the terminals. Align your lug on the lead with the bolt hole on the top and attach the bolt through it. Sometimes using a small screwdriver bit to hold the nut up on the inside makes it easier to hold them in place while securing the bolts. Once you're finished tightening the battery leads up, you can replace the covers over the top of the terminals and place the battery back into the tray. Place your keys into the ignition and turn the bike on, pressing the ignition button to make sure the bike turns over. We can now replace the battery strap over the top of the battery. We're now ready to place our seat onto the vehicle. Take your seat and remove the cover. You'll see there is a notch in the seat which lines up with the bolt on the fuel tank. Slide it into there and then push your seat down firmly. Once you have done this, reattach the nut underneath the seat and tighten up using a 12 spanner or socket. We're now going to level off our brake levers. As you can see, the one on this side is at the correct position, angled very slightly down for rider comfort. However, make sure that it's tight using an 8 spanner or socket. We're now going to level off the lever on the opposite side. So on this side we will need to loosen off the clamp using the 8 spanner or socket. Rotate the lever down slightly until it is at the same position as the lever on the opposite side, and then retighten. When you retighten it, make sure the gap at the top and the bottom of the clamp is equal. We're now going to fit the bar pad onto the vehicle. Remove the velcro cover, push the bar pad over the handlebars, and then reattach your velcro cover over the handlebar pad. Loosen off the Yankee bolts on both sides of the yokes at the top and bottom, but only a fraction to allow us to track the vehicle. Make sure the steering is straight on the vehicle, then look down the edge of the front and rear tyres to make sure they are aligned with each other. If they are not, hold the front wheel between your feet and then rotate the handlebar slightly in the relevant direction to allow the steering to become straight. Once you are happy with this, retighten the bolts on the yokes. We're now going to do an oil change on our bike. It only has transport oil in the engine. First thing we need to do is add some fuel to the tank, make sure everything's in the on position, and then start the bike to allow the engine to warm up till it is lukewarm. Once the engine is warm, turn it off using a 10 socket to remove the sump plug from the engine, making sure there's something underneath the bike to drain the oil into. Be careful when you're doing this because the oil in the engine will be warm. Also make sure you don't drop the socket, the washer or the bolt into the oil when you remove it. Once your oil has fully drained from the bike, replace the sump plug and the washer, tightening it up. We're now going to add the oil into the engine. You can see there's a sight glass on the side of the engine. The oil needs to be at least 3/4 of the way up the sight glass when the bike is stood upright. Undo the filler on the bike and then using some Putoline S4 10W40 oil, open the bottle and add 500 ml into the engine. Once you've added the 500 ml into the engine, replace the filler cap. Make sure the bike is vertical and check the oil level on the sight glass. Wipe any excess oil spills off the bike and then you are now ready to use your bike for the first time. You'll need to run the bike in for 2 to 3 hours using no more than 3/4 throttle. Once you have done this, repeat the oil change process and then your bike is ready to use at full throttle. And that's how you build your new vehicle. I hope you found this guide useful. Now let the fun begin.